If you have been keeping up with Egagasini, Waves of Change on E.tv, then today's episode is one you cannot afford to miss, because the cracks that have been quietly forming underneath the Dube family's picture-perfect image are finally starting to show in public, and by the end of this video you will understand exactly why fans are calling this one of the most important episodes of the season so far. Stick around, because we are breaking down everything that happened in the Friday, August 7, 2026 episode of Egagasini, episode 30, and trust me, there is a lot to unpack. For anyone who is new here, Egagasini, Waves of Change is the new E.tv telenovela set against the vibrant backdrop of Durban's music industry, following three ambitious friends from Umlotsi, Lwandle, Njabulo and Sile, whose group Truth or Dare was catapulted into the spotlight after a viral video, only for their rise to fame to become tangled up with a tragic accident and a secret that refuses to stay buried. The show comes from Stained Glass TV, the same production house behind Durban Jen and Uzalo, so it is no surprise that the storytelling has that same emotional intensity and the same ability to keep viewers hooked from one episode to the next. Since the premiere at the end of June, we have watched Lwandle go from being the quiet church-raised girl hiding her talent behind the camera to becoming the soulful center of a group that is now signed to Senso Dube's label, all while carrying the weight of guilt from what happened on that yacht. That guilt has not gone away, and if anything it has only grown heavier as the season has progressed, especially now that Lwandle has found herself pushed out of her own family home because her parents cannot make peace with the path she has chosen. Now let's get into today's episode, because this is where things really start to boil over. The centerpiece of episode 30 is the Dube family's big launch event, the kind of glamorous, cameras flashing, champagne flowing occasion that Senso and Fume Dube have built their entire public image around. On the surface it looks like exactly what you would expect from this power couple, a slick industry event meant to show the world that Umlalo Records and the Dube name are stronger than ever. But anyone who has been watching this show closely knows that whenever the Dubes throw a big public event, it is never just about the event itself, it becomes the stage where every hidden tension in their world finally gets forced out into the open, and this episode is no exception. The launch is meant to be a triumphant moment, but instead it becomes the moment where the growing cracks in the Dube family's foundation are laid bare for everyone to see, whether they like it or not. Think about everything that has been building up to this. Fume has slowly been connecting the dots about Senso's behavior, and we have already seen her starting to question things after the pool incident and after everything that has happened with Truth or Dare. A public event like this, filled with industry people, artists, and prying eyes, is exactly the kind of pressure cooker environment where a woman who is already suspicious of her husband is going to start noticing things she cannot unsee. When you put Fume in a room full of people who are all watching Senso perform the role of the perfect music mogul, and she is standing right next to him knowing what she now knows or at least suspects, that tension is going to be written all over her face, and I do not think the audience is going to have to wait very long before something gives. Then there is no Musa, who according to the confirmed teaser for this episode takes drastic action during the launch. Now, if you have followed the build up to this point, you will know that Nomusa has not exactly been on the sidelines of this story. Everything involving the Shozi family, the financial pressure that Gogo Shozi and Kidusazi have been under, and the way the different households in this show keep colliding with each other, all of that has been setting the stage for someone to snap. Whether Nomusa's drastic action means she confronts someone publicly, walks away from something she has been holding on to, or does something far more shocking that changes the direction of the show, one thing is clear, she is not willing to keep quiet anymore, and a launch event with this many eyes on it is the perfect place for a decision like that to have maximum impact. It says a lot about where her character has been pushed to, that the writers chose this exact moment, in front of this exact crowd, to have her make her move. And then we cannot forget about Malum Jacob, who true to form finds a way to exploit the entire event for his own profit. If there is one character on this show who consistently proves that he will find an angle to benefit himself in almost any situation, it is Malum Jacob, and honestly at this point it has become one of the more entertaining threads of the show, even if it is deeply frustrating for the other characters around him. We have already seen him try and fail to close a 15-year gap with people who felt insulted rather than reconciled by his effort, so it should not surprise anyone that when a glamorous, high-profile event with money and connections floating around presents itself, he sees opportunity rather than meaning. It fits perfectly with everything we already know about him, a man who is constantly trying to work an angle, and it makes you wonder just how far he is willing to go before the people around him finally catch on and cut him off for good. What makes this episode so compelling is the way all of these threads are colliding in the same physical space at the same time. This is not three separate storylines happening in three separate locations. This is Fume's suspicion, Nomusa's breaking point, and Malum Jacob's opportunism all converging under one roof, at one event, in front of one crowd. That is exactly the kind of setup that great telenovela writing thrives on, because when you put that many volatile ingredients in the same room, something has to give, and the fallout from tonight's launch is almost certainly going to ripple through the rest of the season. Now let's talk about where this leaves Lwandle, because even though she is not the direct center of tonight's episode, everything happening with the Dube family launch matters enormously for her story too. Remember, Lwandle, Sile and Jabulo are all now tied to Umlolo Records through Senso, which means their careers, their reputations and their futures are directly linked to whatever happens to the Dube name. If cracks are showing in the Dube family in such a public way, that instability does not stay contained to Fume and Senso's marriage, it threatens the very foundation that Truth or Dare has been trying to build their careers on. And remember, Lwandle is already dealing with so much personal turmoil. She has been pushed out of her own home because her parents cannot accept her choice to pursue music, and she has been carrying the guilt of what happened on that yacht every single day since it happened. She has been trying to hold on to her career as the one thing that is going right in her life, the one thing that could eventually let her stand on her own 2 feet and live life on her own terms. If the very label she has pinned her hopes on starts to crumble from within because of Senso and Fume's issues, that puts everything Lwandle has been working towards at risk, right at a moment when she has nothing else to fall back on. That is why this episode, even though it is framed around the Dube family's launch, still feels deeply connected to Lwandle's ongoing struggle to find any kind of peace in her life, because her peace has become tied to the stability of people whose lives are anything but stable right now. It is also worth pointing out how well this show uses big public events as a storytelling device. We saw it earlier in the season with the yacht party, which is where this entire chain of guilt and secrecy began in the first place, and now we are seeing it again with this launch event. There seems to be a pattern forming here. Every time these characters gather in a glamorous, public, high-pressure setting, something happens that changes the trajectory of the show. It is a smart structural choice by the writers, because it keeps the drama from feeling repetitive. Each event has its own flavor and its own consequences, but they all share that same DNA of forcing characters into rooms together where they cannot avoid each other and cannot hide behind their usual excuses. Something else worth mentioning is how this episode continues to build out the financial pressure storyline around the Shozi family. We already know that Gogo Shozi and Kidusazi have been forced into some tough decisions because of mounting financial pressure, and it is not hard to imagine that an event like the Dube launch, with all its wealth and spectacle on display, only sharpens that contrast for a family that is struggling to make ends meet. When you put a family fighting to stay afloat financially in the same narrative universe as a family throwing lavish industry parties, the class divide becomes impossible to ignore, and I think that contrast is very intentional. It reinforces one of the deeper themes of this show, which is about the cost of ambition and how differently that cost gets paid depending on which side of the wealth divide you are standing on. If I had to guess where things go from here, I would say we are heading into a stretch of episodes where the fallout from tonight's launch dominates the storyline for at least the next week or two. Fume's suspicions about Senso are not going to just disappear, and if this event gives her even more reason to doubt him, we could be looking at a confrontation between the two of them sooner rather than later. Nomusa's drastic action, whatever form it takes, is going to have consequences that reach beyond just her own storyline, especially if it happens in a public setting with witnesses. And Malum Jacobs' attempts to profit off the event could easily backfire on him in a way that finally forces the people around him to stop giving him second chances. None of this is confirmed beyond what has been teased, so take this as informed speculation rather than spoilers, but based on how this show has built its story so far, these are the threads I would be watching most closely going into next week. For Lwandle specifically, I do not think we are anywhere close to her finding peace, and honestly I am not sure the show wants her to find it anytime soon, because her unresolved guilt and her strained relationship with her parents are two of the emotional engines driving this entire season. What I am watching for is whether the instability at Lwandle Records, sparked by whatever happens at this launch, ends up pushing Lwandle to make a decision about her own future, whether that means leaning even harder into her music career as her only way out, or whether it forces her to finally confront her parents and try to repair that relationship before it is too late. Either way, her story and the Dube family's story are now permanently intertwined, and tonight's episode made that connection even clearer. That is my breakdown of the Friday, August 7, 2026 episode of Egagasini, Waves of Change. This show continues to prove why it has become one of the most talked about new dramas on E.TV, mixing music industry ambition with deep family drama in a way that keeps every episode feeling essential. If you enjoyed this breakdown, let me know in the comments who you think Nomusa's drastic action was aimed at, and whether you think Fume is finally going to confront Censor after everything that happened at this launch. Make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss the next episode breakdown, because based on how this episode ended, next week is going to be even bigger. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.